All right, so we are live. Great. Let's wait for more people to join in before we begin today's webinar. For all those who are joining, why don't we share in the chat box our names and where we've joined from? I'd really like to get some conversation going on in the chat box. I'll start first. I am Shivam and I am the content head at Zapscale. Spencer is joining from Colorado. How are you, Spencer? Hi. Sophie Kelly has joined from Ireland. Hello. Okay, then I think we can start. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, depending on where you're joining from. Welcome and thank you for dialing us for our today's webinar. We are here with another exciting topic, transforming a startup with a customer-centric mindset. This webinar is brought to you by the CS Mentor, a podcast by Ankit Aggarwal, who's one of the top CS professionals from India. This webinar is sponsored by Zapscale. We are the easiest customer success platform for B2B SaaS organizations. Now, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our panelists for today. We have Ankit Aggarwal. Ankit is a multi-award winning customer success professional from India, who began his career as a coder and went on to co-found two successful ventures. He's recognized for his contributions to the industry, having launched the CS Mentor podcast and established the largest customer success community in India. Ankit is now settled into a challenging role as a customer success enablement lead at MoEngage. Our second panelist and the special guest for today is Rick Adams. Rick is the founder and CEO of Practical CSM. Practical CSM provides consultancy, training, certification services for customer success professionals to help them become more productive and more efficient in their roles. Rick has over 25 years of experience of working in the IT industry. Adams's recent work includes developing and delivering a global certification program on customer success management for Cisco Systems. And he's also published a book on customer success titled Practical Customer Success Management, a best practice framework for managers and professionals. Now, I cannot wait for Ankit and Rick to take you through this amazingly insightful webinar. But before we get started, I'd like to go over one tiny thing so you know how to participate in today's event. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to Rick and Ankit by typing your questions into the Q&A box or the chat box into your Zoom control panel. You may send in the questions at any time during the webinar. I'll bring them up in between the webinar and also at the sections in the end. And if you don't want to ask questions in the form of a text, you can always raise your hand and I'll allow you to speak. So you can ask the questions from our panelists yourself. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard, but my dogs were really barking in the background. I'm really sorry for that. Now, let's get to the panelists to the stage. Ankit and Rick, a very warm welcome to today's webinar. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Shivam. Good. I think we can start but before we start, I would like to talk about why I specifically chose this topic. So back, if we go back 2 years ago, I realized that a lot of companies, at least in the emerging markets, they didn't know much about customer success. Let's talk about India, right? So there were very few companies which were talking about customer success. There were few roles. But when the pandemic hit, there was a huge surge. Companies lost revenue. And then companies actually realized that, hey, if the new revenue is not coming, we need something to stop the leaky funnel. We need something so that we can retain more revenue and grow from existing customers. And that's where companies actually realize that this is the time to hire customer success managers. And what I realized that here in India and also in emerging markets, a lot of companies started hiring for customer success managers. And that's where I think I got this idea that it's not just about CS as a department or as an individual responsibility. It's more about building a customer-centric culture around your organization. And that's what we wanted to speak about today. So with that, I would like to welcome Rick again for joining us today on this topic. And let's start this topic. So I would like to ask first, Rick, when we talk about customer-centric mindset, what do you think, like, how do we define a customer-centric mindset and why this is important for tech or SaaS companies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So hi, Ankit. Hi, everybody. And also, I'm going to let you know, my dogs also are loose in the house with me. So if you do hear barking from my dogs, I apologize in advance as well. Seems like a common theme today. So yeah, so great question. And okay, what is a customer-centric mindset? Well, if you think about business in general, and what I really mean, I guess, is commercial business, but business that is there for profit. Who is it there to profit? Well, the answer actually is the owners of the business, always. Okay, that is why they set up that business in the first place, put all those years of effort in, put their savings into it, persuaded their family members to put it in, raised money from loans and the bank and so on, and then worked really, really hard evenings and weekends, to make that business work. If it's a small business or if it's a big business, well, then the owners are the investors, they're the shareholders, and it's their hard-earned money that they have earned, or indeed other people's money trusted to them that they are by law have to try and maximize the value for, like a trust fund, for example. And so they are placing that money with that business in buying shares in order to maximize the return from those shares. So it is the owners of the business that is trying to make the maximum profit. And so it is easy to slip into thinking, therefore, that the best way to make the maximum profit is, of course, well, to try and increase the amount of income and keep the amount of expenditure as low as possible. So in other words, price your product or your service as high as you possibly can, and make the product with as little money as possible, support it with as little money as possible, and do as little as possible after you've sold it, so that you've got the maximum amount of profit. Now, there's an obvious flaw with that. And the obvious flaw with that is if you price yourself too high, no one's going to buy your product. And the second issue is if you make it low quality or don't support it afterwards, no one's going to buy it again.
Correct.
So they might buy it the first time, but they won't buy it after.
They will never come back again. Yeah.
Right. And this was brought very much to attention when software as a service became a thing, because in the old world, the way that software or indeed any product was sold was, you had a price for it, and the customer purchased it, and then it was theirs, and they could do what they wanted with it because it's theirs. And it was also their problem to make it work. So you gave them your software, they gave you their money, you shook their hands, waved them goodbye, and wished them good luck with it. Okay. Now, if it breaks, then of course they'll if there's a bug in it, they need it fixing. So you're going to have some support and so on. But basically, the deal was, you make the purchase. It's up to them now to make a success of using that product or service, whatever it is. Software as an example, but it fits with anything. Now, in the new world, with software as a service, it doesn't work like that, because you don't actually sell the software, you just sell access to the software for a period, which could be as little as a month. maybe a year, maybe 2 years, depends on the contract length, right? But let's say, for example, for a business-to-business deal, it's a 12-month contract. So now, whereas before you might have sold your software for, say, I don't know, 500 or 1,000 or 10,000, depends what it is, dollars per seat or per license. Maybe now it's much less because it's only for a year. So a classic example of something like Microsoft Office moved to Office 365, or the Adobe suite, that moved to a similar, and where it was maybe $500 to purchase, now it's just $75, to hire for the year. And so if that's the case, then if Microsoft were making $500 every time, and now they're only making $75, they must keep the customer for at least 6 or 7 years just to break even on the deal compared to the old world. So suddenly the software provider, it's in their interests to make absolutely certain that that customer is not going to go anywhere, that they are going to renew. So how do you do that? Well, of course, you've got to make sure the customer remains, I'll say happy. Okay. Now, happy is not a great word for it, but it'll do for now, because actually what we don't want necessarily is happy customers so much as customers who are achieving their outcomes, which we can talk about in more depth, Ankit, as you know all about. It's not necessarily happiness, it's about results. And that is where the idea of customer centricity comes in, is that instead of like thinking about ourselves as business owners, i.e., how can we maximize our profits in the moment? Well, try and make the price as high as possible, try and make the expenditure as low as possible. That's all ours now. That's the wrong way around. We need to turn the lens around and look at it from the customer's point of view, a customer-centric perspective, which says, okay, instead of that, how can we make our product as valuable as possible? And how can we make sure that they're getting that value out of the product after they've purchased it? It's still our problem because we don't want them to go away.
No, that is very much right. I mean, in case, companies cannot keep their existing customers, they would be losing out on revenue. And obviously, a lot of companies don't think about it. But what happens is, let's say a customer is not achieving that outcome. They would go around, say, the software didn't work for us. And in the end, it's basically bad mouthing. And the other customers who are more likely to come, they might not even come. So in the end, you not just lose existing customers, you might lose out some potential customers as well. So that is why I think it's very much essential that you adopt this customer centric mindset. Now, there is one thing as well, Rick. A lot of people, they say that, okay, we are a customer first company, or we are a customer obsessed company. Do you think customer centricity is same as customer first, or do you feel there is some difference around it?
Yeah, I would honestly, I think both expressions could mean anything, depends who's saying it. So I don't think there's really a clear dictionary definition that everyone in the world says this expression means this. It's too new, really. And as I said, I think whoever uses it, they mean what they mean by it. So I don't tend to worry too much about customer centric or customer first. I think both are very reasonable expressions to use. But in conversation, I do think it's sometimes worth checking if you're having an important conversation with somebody about something that matters, then it's worth checking to make sure you understand what they do mean. So if somebody says to you, blah, 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 customer centric, blah, 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 or blah, 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 customer first, blah, 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 you might say, can I just check exactly what you mean by that, so that I'm clear as to, what you're saying, so that I can then have a rational conversation with you that's actually meaningful, rather than just assuming that I know. So I would say that, but I think that the idea of customer centricity, or indeed customer first, goes much broader and deeper than having a customer success organization. Now, you and I, obviously, that's our sort of core area, is customer success management, a particular team with particular people who are professionals who do a specific task around customer success management, which could again be loosely defined as keeping customers happy after they bought something. Again, happy is not the right word, but nevertheless, just for ease, just for quickness. But there's much more to it than that, because actually, when you think about the overall customer journey, which is an expression that I'm sure, I know you're familiar with, and I'm sure like most of the people on this call are familiar with the concept of a customer journey. The customer journey begins much earlier than when the customer success management team are going to be looking after that client. And in fact, arguably you could say the customer journey begins before the customer even is aware that our company exists. When they first uncover a need. And so the true customer-centric or customer-first company, if you like, let's say the true customer-centric company will have researched and understood for their particular customers that they're aimed at, for the segment that they've identified. They know what that challenge or problem or initiative is. They understand what it is that those clients want, maybe better than even the clients do. Okay, and so that's what makes them customer centric, is that they are, if you like, walking a mile in the client's shoes. They're understanding the challenge that the client has, and they're working backwards from that, rather than trying to push a product out to the world saying, buy our product, it's got all these fantastic features in it, you'll love it. Okay, instead of that, what they're doing is they're identifying customers that have a particular challenge and saying to them, you've got this challenge, haven't you? We can help, and we know we can help because we fixed it for other companies who've got the same challenge.
Got it. That is definitely a very good point, Rick. But help me understand. I think a lot of seasoned CSMs and people who have customer success background can find it out. Okay, this is something that customers want actually. But a lot of times I have seen customer success managers struggling with it. And they tend to take more sort of, a reactive approach because they don't know what a customer actually wants. So what do you think? How do you make sure, how can CSMs make sure, or how a company can make sure that they know what customers want?
Yeah, that's such a great point, Ankit, and you're absolutely right. And I think that this can't, or I say can't, it's very difficult for an individual customer success manager to fix that. And in fact, if that is happening, then I would look to the head of that customer success function department if I was going to allocate blame, which doesn't always help anyway, right? It's not about blaming, it's about fixing. But they're the ones who are responsible for the culture and also for the role and the activities. They are the ones who tell people this is what I want you to do, and then the reaction from the CSMs is to go out and do it. So I do agree. Very commonly, as I was introduced, I run a training company. We specialize in training in customer success management. Typically, when I get on a first call with a prospect, I'm talking to a head of customer success, VP CS or director of CS or whoever it is, and they are telling me pretty much exactly that. They're saying, oh, my team is too too reactive. I need them to be more proactive. They've always been reactive. They came from technical support or customer services, so they're used to being reactive, and I don't know how to make them more proactive. And they, can you help me? Of course, the answer is yes, but setting that aside, how do we do that? Well, you've got to actually make this part of their activities and the expectations that you give them, and you've got to retrain them, because typically very few people in customer success management go from college into customer success management. They go into other customer facing roles, typically support being a very typical one, and then they bring that knowledge and skills, and some of that knowledge and skills is extremely applicable, but it tends to be a more reactive role. And what we mean by that, in case anyone's not clear, is they wait for the customer to have a problem, and then the customer then to come to us and say, I've got this problem, can you help me fix it? And the CSM says, yes, of course, I'm your customer success manager, I'm here to fix your problems, let me help you. That is a customer support role. That role is really somebody there to support the customer if or when they have issues. The job of the customer success manager is much, or should be much more proactive, as you were saying.
Yeah.
In other words, on day one, or day zero even, the customer has just purchased, or it's now implemented, it's ready to use. That CSM should be there at the senior stakeholders' door saying, okay, I want to help you. I want to help you to plan out how you are going to maximize the value over the next few years of your purchase and investment in my company's product or service, our solution. And that means, this needs careful thought, because it's a complicated piece of software that you've just purchased. It's not, if it's chewing gum, we don't need a customer success manager, right?
Yeah.
It just says, put it in, unwrap, put in mouth, chew. That's it. You don't need any help. You can
Correct.
get the value on your own. But if it's a complex piece of software with multiple people doing multiple things on multiple functions and different ways of setting it up and all the rest of it, there's a lot that I know, because I know my product, that you don't know. You know your company, and you know the people, and you know the capabilities and what they know already and what they don't know, and so on. So between us, we're going to work this out. We're going to create a plan to adopt and to become masters of this product, to work out the right process, to get people doing that, and then to be measuring it and to be showing that they're doing the right things, so that you as a customer, first of all, get value as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
But secondly, get as much value as possible. So that's the job. And that is a proactive, and that should be with every customer. Now, some customers might say, thank you, no thank you. And of course, right, they are the customer, and it's their choice, and you can't force, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can offer customer success management services. It is not necessarily, that every customer is going to say that they want it, and some are going to be more open than others. So you might have one client who's, I'm so glad you're here, because we don't know what to do and we would love your help, and others that you're going to have to be a bit more stubborn, and you're going to have to do a lot more pushing to get them to do what you want them to do, because they don't know what's good for them and they think they know better than you. All right. And fair enough. And of course, we need to keep maybe they do know better than us attitude as well at all times, but nevertheless, they might need more help in that sense of understanding the why behind customer success management. But the ideal customer is one who recognizes that when they made that purchase, they didn't buy a product, they bought a product and the help of the customer success manager to use the product. Right. And that then comes down to sales and what they explain in sales as to what they're buying. And it's a great differentiator, by the way.
Right. Yeah.
So, how do you differentiate if your product is the same or similar to another client, a competitor? Well, one of the differences might be you don't just get the product. You get Ankit and his fantastic team of highly trained, qualified customer success managers who know what they're doing and have been there and done that with many clients in similar situations to you, so that you can be reassured when you buy this that you're not going to be left on your own. We are going to help you and guide you through that journey of unconscious incompetence.
Yeah.
I know I've bought it, but I haven't got a clue what to do, to conscious incompetence. Oh, have I got to do all that lot to get it working? Through to conscious competence. Now we know what to do and we're doing it. Through to mastery. Now we're experts at it. And that is a journey where they need potentially our help if it is a complex enough solution. As I say, if it's chewing gum, leave them to it. If it's a complicated piece of software, they should be desperate for our help if they've got any sense.
Yeah. I totally understand that. And this is what I speak to others as well. Whenever I have a conversation with someone, I say to folks that, hey, we CSMs are not just helping out, our customers. Customers see us as trusted advisors because they want to trust us. If they're purchasing a software, they would want to know what are the best practices, what are others doing in the market, and how can I achieve the same? So we don't need to, let's say we have a customer in e-commerce and we have some existing customers in e-commerce business. Then we should proactively reach out to customer and say, hey, you are doing this, but I know company B is also doing this, and we can also offer you something like this. So why don't you go through it? I think that would increase your retention, that would improve your CTRs, revenue, and other things. And once you basically do that, it's in our favor as well, because the stickiness increases and the trust also
Absolutely.
increases.
I so agree with you, Ankit. You made such a great point. I have learned, we offer customer success management to our clients, okay? And we have learned so much from our best customers. And by best, I don't mean best for us. I mean the customers who got the most out of our service. We've learned by observing what they do and how they got the best out of us. And then what we've tried to do is then sort of templatize that and pass that on as guidance to all the other clients to say, look, these ones have been really successful. This is why they were successful. This is what they did and what they didn't do sometimes as well. But this is, primarily what they did do to make sure that they got that value. And this is therefore what we recommend you do as well.
Correct. Coming back to our own topic, Rick. So, I think a lot of time what happens is a lot of companies think that they don't need a CS department, or they don't need customer-centric mindset as of yet, because they are very new. They have just started. Sometimes they are confused why they should need it. So what do you think, when and why they should adopt a customer-centric mindset?
I think that's a great question. So, and I want to come back also, because you mentioned trusted advisor, and we haven't talked about trusted advisor status enough as well. So that as well. But the point you make is a really good one. And I think that there is an argument that says that you don't necessarily need a 20 strong customer success team on day one of a startup business, because you haven't got any customers. Okay. Like there is nothing for a CSM to do until you've got some customers. When you get your very first customer on day one, well, they are actually, how are you going to help them by telling them how all your other customers have, as I just said, what they did to make the best when you haven't had any, so you don't yet know yourself. Perhaps it's going to be a journey of discovery for you as well, as to what's the best practice for using and embedding and adopting. And so you're going to have to learn that from your first customers. So that's why, generally speaking, your first customers get a fantastic deal, because it's a bigger risk, because who the hell are you, and what does it work or doesn't it? We don't know yet, So we'll do it really cheap for you, and you can be our case study, and then we'll learn. We'll learn on the job, and you get value and we get value. And that's typically how we start. We have some initial friendly lower cost customers who agree to sort of help us in that sort of way. So actually, it's going to be perhaps by your when you've got a dozen customers, then you're going to be thinking, well, we don't want any of these to leave us now, because if there's they're really, we want them to renew every year, and we don't now want to lose that revenue. So it's at that point, when there's maybe a dozen customers and losing that revenue would look painful to you, that is the point when you need to start thinking about, okay, so now we need somebody whose job it is to make sure as much as they can that we don't lose any of that revenue. So not right from day one, but planning, that's different. So I think planning should be even at day zero, at the planning stage, even before you launch, you should be thinking about customer success and planning for it, but not necessarily having a customer success specialist on board, because it costs money, right? I mean, it's a salary and it's IT and so on. So you probably could hold off a little bit for that, and handle it through support and handle it through your account manager, salesperson initially, until you've got your sort of dozen or so customers, and then is your time to bring in the CSM, because you can then arm them with everything that you've learned, and they've also got customers to spend their time with now.
No, that's certainly right. And there's something interesting as well, Rick. When I'm speaking to someone about customer-centric mindset, what they felt, and they had this feeling about customer success teams as well, that customer success teams feel that customer is always right. Yes, we want to make sure that customer is always right, but they are not always right. So what do you think? What are the downsides of having a customer-centric mindset in the companies? Or what do you feel about the statement that customer is always right?
So it's one of those expressions, isn't it? So you can easily pick it apart. Now, let's be frank, nobody is always right. I mean, I'm not always right, you're not always right, and neither are customers always right. So so we need to like just sort of look at it with a little bit of a pinch of salt here. That's not what it's saying. It's not saying customers are always right and that's that. It's saying our attitude should be that the customer is always right, in the sense of we need to always listen to them with respect and try and understand what they are saying without assuming that they are wrong before we've really thought about it. Because, you know, sometimes we might be surprised and they are telling us something and our assumption is wrong. So whether or not the customer is right, the customer is the customer is paying, the customer deserves respect, of course, and the customer should be listened to. And then we can then respond from a position of authority and power to that, which might well be, I'm so glad you've told me that, I didn't realize, you're quite right, and this is what I'm going to do. Or it could be, I completely understand why you're saying that and why you would think that that is the case, because from your perspective, that would look like that's the case. Let me explain to you why it isn't. And then, you know, explain the difference, because they may not know. There may be good reasons why they don't know what you know. And indeed, you should know stuff that they don't know, because if you don't, what use are you? Okay, if they already know everything you know, and this to the point actually that Avinash is making in the chat. He's saying, how technically knowledgeable should a CSM be on your products? And I would say, yeah, pretty knowledgeable, not to the extent of being the same expert as like a coder if it's software, or, you know, not to that level. You can have your experts that they bring in, but expert enough in that product to be useful to the client, so that they understand the possibilities, they understand what it can do and how it does it in general terms. They understand who uses it, for what purposes. They understand what, and in particular from the CSM's point of view, what it will take to get it up and running and working to that level it needs to be working in that organization. So they understand that, and that's what clients need from us, is that understanding. And it may well be that clients think they know what the problem is, and they come to us saying, right, your product doesn't work because it doesn't da. And actually, you know darn well your product does do that. It's just that they're doing something wrong. And that whole customer is not always right, you know, actually. Or even sometimes, you know, it doesn't do what the old product does. No, that's right. You don't want it to do that anymore. Let me explain why you don't want that. You want this now. It does something else. And you don't want to do that, and this is why. And so there's that famous expression about Henry Ford. If he'd asked his customers what they wanted, they would have told him faster horses. Okay, no, they don't want faster horses. Well, you know, what they wanted was to travel more quickly and more conveniently and get there more quickly. So their assumption is that means a faster horse. Okay? Because they don't know what we know about our product. Correct. They don't know they need a motor car because they've never heard of it before. Correct. Right? So that's the Henry Ford quote that I think is very, very relevant in this context. So sometimes the client comes to us with assumptions that are perfectly reasonable, perfectly understandable, because they don't have the whole picture. Why should they? They know their side, they know their problems, they know, you know, what they're trying to achieve, but they don't necessarily know our side as well as we do, which is our product and the art of the possible in our product, you know, and how to make it work in the situation that they have. That's our job. Absolutely, that's our job. Correct. And then that comes back, if I may, sorry, I'm just going to carry right on, if you don't mind, back to that trusted advisor thing, because whether or not they're prepared to listen to us depends on whether they trust our opinions or not. And so why should they? If they've never met us before, and this sort of person just turns up and starts telling them what to do, why should they listen? So actually, it is important for the CSM to start as early as possible to build great relationships with the senior stakeholders within the client organization, and go as high up as possible. Try and get introduced up the levels. Try to get the influence of more senior people. Why? Well, because they tend to be bigger decision makers with bigger checkbooks. So and their decision is holds sway against others. So, you know, we want them on board. We want that person saying, now listen to what Ankit has to say, because I've had a conversation with him and I see that he gets it from my business point of view. So I'm now giving him the authority to come to you to explain to you and guide you in how to actually now make this work. Please. Thank you. Listen to him. And that's what you want from that sort of senior person, is the authority. Because you don't have any, you don't work for that company even. You can't tell people what to do, but you can, if you've got authority from a senior stakeholder, go in and say, whoever, Raj has invited me in to work with you to help you to make this work. Oh, well, if Raj says it, we'll do it. So, as an example of why the trusted advisor status is so important.
That's right. That's right. I think trusted advisor is such a great thing that it can go ahead in a longer run. I remember one time, I was implementing a software at a company, and then a person reached out to me and asked me for suggestions on another software. Now that software is something which I don't use. I mean, he just thought that I am a technology guy. And since I know about technology, I know about all the softwares, I might be able to guide him in the right direction. And that person was basically the decision maker and executive sponsor. So what happens is, once you have that rapport, once you become a trusted advisor, customers might come to you and ask a lot of things, which means they think that you know about this stuff and they trust you, and it would give you a lot of information as well. So they would get to know if the customer is churning, if a competitor is approaching them, or something else is happening, and you might be able to save your account just with that rapport. So I've seen that happening, and I think that is a valuable asset. If you become trusted advisor, you can do such a great thing. I wanted to ask one more thing. What people think is, when we adopt a customer success or customer-centric mindset, customers are not always right. We discussed about this. How do we tell and handle a situation where a customer is wrong? How do you tell them this? Hey, at this point of time, you are wrong.
You use tact and diplomacy.
More about that, please, Rick.
Well, what you don't say, you don't roll your eyes and say, listen, you idiot, that's obviously wrong.
Yeah.
Instead, you say, thank you very much for explaining the situation. I now think I understand it. Let me just check and actually perhaps repeat back what you're saying, that you've got this challenge and you're experiencing this issue, which leads you to believe that this is the problem and that this is then the result of that. And you're not happy with that, and that needs fixing. Have I got it right? So you're first of all showing them that you bothered to listen, and that you now understand the problem, and they know you know and understand. And if they affirm that, great. And if they say, no, you've got it wrong, then say, well, could you just explain it again, and make sure, and then repeat that process. And this is active listening. So step one, active listening, to make sure, A, that you really do understand what they're saying and you're not mistaken, and B, that they know that you know what they're saying, okay, so that they can't be thinking, well, you're not answering my question now. So then you move on to actually answering the question, and that's the the tactful bit. So and I would, and if I can see perhaps that they don't understand because they don't know some information, right? They're ignorant of information that I have, and they just don't know it. Okay, I can see perhaps why they believe that. So that's what I would say. Like, as I said before, look, I completely understand why you've reached that conclusion. I think if I was in your situation, I would also have reached exactly the same conclusion, because from your perspective, it looks like A plus B equals C. Actually, what you're not aware of that I am, that gives me a different perspective, is factor D. And factor D is making all the difference here. Do you mind if I just quickly explain why D is so important? Get their permission and then explain. So, how good a communicator are you? Are you tactful? Are you diplomatic? Are you able to win people over with reasoning? Are you showing them, first of all, though, courtesy, and that you have listened and that you really understand their problem, and that you're not trying to force them to do what you want? You are actually on board with their problem, trying to fix it for them. Yeah. And then that comes back to the the trusted advisor status, doesn't it? So you that's something you've got to build on. I see that as being like savings in the bank. So over a period of time, you're making little deposits of trust every time you're helpful and you're courteous and you're useful to them, until it gets to the point when it's you got a problem. Oh, cool, Ankit.
Yeah.
He's great. He understands straight away.
Yeah.
He already knows us really well. He'll know the answer, and if he doesn't, he'll give us advice as to who to go to. So yeah, give Ankit. That's what you want. That's the trusted advisor, is their first port of call for any of their problems. That's a very powerful position when we're trying to sell more to that organization. So but it takes time to get there.
It takes
How
time.
you do it. And by the way, if you don't ever need to do anything like this for the client, because everything goes okay for the client, then you probably will end up with an okay relationship with the client. When that client gets stressed and then ends up sort of kind of, if not shouting at you, then intimating that your product is a piece of whatever, and it's not doing what you should and all the rest of it, and you turn that around politely and say, look, I totally get it. I completely understand why you're frustrated. I would be frustrated if I was in that position. That sounds very unpleasant for you to be in. I'm so sorry that you're experiencing this right now. However, I do think I might have a solution to this. And actually, I think it's not what you think it is. But let me explain. Do you have 5 minutes? Do you mind if I just take a step back and just walk through what I think this issue actually is with you? And that's diffusing, right? You're agreeing, you're understanding, you're calming that, that upness, that sort of whole, you're being the mature one in the relationship, right? And they are going to, rather than rolling your eyes and like, ugh, or when you're like slightly stressed and because it's been a difficult call on to the bank, and the bank person, you've been put between one person, another person. You've had to phone multiple times. You've been on hold for 10 minutes, and then they ask you the same question again. I've already given you my number 15 times. Why do you need my PIN number again? I don't need to be talked to in that manner, sir. Oh, no. Well, I don't need that's not helping.
No, that's such a great example. I remember this conversation. So I had this thing around. So there was this angry customer. Our product was not working. Obviously, products they tend to not work at the time when our customers need it most. But anyways, somehow it was not working. But I tried listening to the customer, listened to him around, pacified them, and now the person became such a good friend. Then when he moved into different companies, he came back to me and asked, hey, Ankit, we want you as our CSM because we are also using your system. So that's such a great point, because if you didn't have that kind of a relationship, if you didn't have the bad situations with your customers, and somehow you can turn it into a very good situation, I think you'd never have that kind of a relationship with that customer. You never gain that sort of a trust with the customer that you could do. So if it's all good, it's just a regular thing. They might not feel that, okay, this person, this CSM is giving us such kind of experience. So
it's an emotional intelligence thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's why I always say, that's what I always speak to the CSMs in my company, that, hey, whenever there is a churn risk, that could be an opportunity for even an upsell, because they might, if they become happy, they might give us more business.
And by the way, for those who manage a team, I would say in the hiring process, that is one of the key things that I'm looking for, is somebody who is good at handling and managing people, who is comfortable with dealing with people at various seniority levels, who is good at making friends and influencing people, who is good at forming trust relationships, and who is not gonna be like standing on their rights. I don't need to be spoken to like that. No, they're right. They shouldn't be spoken to like that. Well, but tough, because you're going to be. So yes, you're right, you shouldn't be, but funnily enough, the world doesn't revolve around you. And if you think it does, you're probably not the right person for my team. Okay. So that's how I would look at it.
Got it. I think we are just approaching the time, but I will ask you one final question, Rick.
Please do, yeah.
About customer-centric mindset again, how do you think, who should be the spokesperson, who should be the person who should be responsible for customer-centric mindset, and in a team, how can it be measured?
Yeah, you're right to ask that. I think it's really important to say that attitude, or if you like, corporate culture, comes from the very top. Always it comes from
always from the top. Yeah.
So the very top is the is the CEO or president or equivalent, or at least at the board, the senior management team. So they are the ones that must set that standard, and they set that standard not just by what they say, but also by what they do. And by the way, in a sense, their staff, their employees, are also customers. So the way they treat their staff will very much indicate how they think about their customers as well. They should be have this servant leadership type attitude, because they understand, as we said right at the beginning, that for sure, the purpose of the business at the end of the day is to maximize the profit for the owners, but you do that first of all by increasing the value for customers, which brings them to you, and by maximizing the value for employees, so that you get good quality employees attracted to you and they stick around. Because if you don't, then you're never going to satisfy your customers, which means you're never going to get the profits that you want at the end of the day. So it's very much from the top, and again, you're obviously filtering down to that is then your department heads, and in particular with us, obviously, therefore it's your head of customer success, and they need to be sort of clear as to what the expectation is, and again, leading by example, showing by the way they treat their team and by the way they treat their customers that this is what my expectation is from all of my team members as well.
Great. Thanks a lot, Rick. I think it's time we can take questions.
Ankit, Abhishek has raised his hand for quite a lot of time. I am going to allow him to talk. Abhishek, you can ask your question.
Hey, hi, Rick.
Hi.
Pleasure listening to you.
Thank you.
So I have a quick question. So, but in fact, many organizations are now focusing on converting the customer-centric experience into revenue, right? At the same time, they feel that the CSMs are going to be the key here. They are trying to, expand their role from say retention and adoption to actually the growth metrics, that is major cross-sell and upsell. So what, according to you, are the key indicators that needs to be focused apart from consumption? Because people tend to focus on a lot, more from the consumption standpoint. What, according to you, are those other metrics that needs to be focused in order to make sure that they are actually getting that end goal of converting the experience into revenue?
Right. Well, you raise a good point. So I think first of all, you've got to decide what you want your customer success management team to do, and you need to consider how realistic that is. If you're spreading them too thin in terms of they've got to do this, they've got to do this. They're responsible for onboarding, they're responsible for adoption, they're responsible for QBRs and for measurements, they're responsible for upselling and cross-selling, for advocacy, they're responsible for forming trusted business. They're you've got to start wondering what they're not responsible for. Okay, so step one, you need to be realistic in your organization, and then fund and resource that team accordingly. And that's the bit that gets missed, is like I see these teams that are getting more and more stressed because they have more and more responsibilities placed on them, but not given the resources. Like, for example, there's no training budget. It's really frustrating for me as a training company. You have all these companies that say, well, we don't know what we're doing, but we can't afford your training. There's your choice. Carry on with untrained CSMs and see how far it gets you. That is a big frustration, is you've got to be realistic in your expectations. So sorry, I know that didn't answer your question. So to answer your question then, all right, well, what is it? You need to pick the measurements that suit what your team is trying to achieve. So actually, I'll tell you what, I said earlier, we checked to see if I could share my screen, and I could, and I said not that I'm expecting to, but actually I will. So what I've got here is some ideas as to what you could be, I don't know if you can see that or how big that is, what you could be measuring. There we go, and I'll just make that a bit bigger. There, hopefully that's a bit better. So you could measure how many commitments do they get from clients to work with them as the customer success manager to attain their value? How many customer success plans do they get completed? How many quarterly business review meetings are they holding? How many renewal quotations are they submitting? How many business outcome workshops are they completing? How many qualified sales opportunities are they identifying and passing across to sales or dealing with if they need to do it? How many advocacy requests are they making? How many referral requests are they making? What is their ratio of proactive work to reactive work, where they're being asked to do something or when they're going to the client to recommend things? How many sales meetings are they attending and getting involved in that? And that's that yellow stuff, that's the activity. Then we can look at, well, what about from the client's perspective? The Net Promoter Score, the CSAT rating, the advocacy that they're giving us and referrals that they're giving us will tell us, the attitude of the client to us. Then we can look at the actual activity of the client from the point of view of our software. Are they logging in, and how much? How much time are they spending? Which features are they using? And how far up that value chain into the senior leadership are we getting, and how important therefore do they perceive us and our product? Then we can look at the activity from the point of view, so what did we win? So are we winning renewal quotations? What's our ratio for the quotations that we're actually saying yes to? For the advocacy that we're asking earlier on here, how many are we getting advocacy done? How many qualified sales do we actually get? And what's the revenues from qualified sales? Then we can measure the ultimate stuff, which proves the value. What's the customer retention ratio? What's the net revenue retention, the ARR? What's our average customer? How long are they staying with us? And what's the value that we get on that customer on average? And also then, if we are then even growing further, what I would suggest we're even contributing to net new revenues, because we're doing all of this and proving to the client, as we said earlier, come to us because we have such great customer success. So we're also in principle even contributing to net new revenues. So there's some ideas for you there.
All right, I hope that answered the question, Abhishek. I'm going to take another question from Abu. This is for you, Rick. What are some of the common pitfalls that SaaS companies make when trying to adopt a customer-centric approach, and how can these be avoided?
I thought that was a great question. I saw that. Yeah. So I think, and I think, Ankit, you might have sort of alluded a little bit to this. I think one of the things we tend to do, because we're into technology and software and all the rest of it, we tend to be too technical. So then in our meetings with the client, we tend to go to what we're comfortable with, and we tend to end up having techie meetings about techie things instead of having business meetings about business things. And actually, to the business decision makers, it's the business things that matter most. Those are the conversations we should be having. So number one error is for our customer success team to focus on the technical rather than to focus on the business. It's the business outcomes that matter. They're the ones that come first, last, and always. That doesn't mean technical's not important, of course, but it's secondary to the business outcome requirements. And we must make sure we understand why technology is going in place, what it needs to do, how it needs to be done, how we're measuring it, and what the value returned is from a business point of view. That should be our focus. So I would say that is the number one thing that I see. The second thing, which we've just been talking about, is that I'm seeing a lot of stress from overworked customer success management teams. It feels like that almost like, well, we don't really know exactly what they do, so we'll just keep adding stuff to them because, you know, they're the last people, they're the last team in, and no one else does this, so I guess it must be theirs thing to do. And then we give them more and more things to do. So I think that there is a lack of clarity around, well, what actually do we want that CS team to do? And then stop giving them other things to do, because you can't be making the sandwiches and sweeping the floor and, you know, whatever else, and be doing customer success management. So stop asking them to do everything. Work out what you really need your customer success team to do, which you should know how to, and if you don't, come to us and we'll explain how you find out what your CS team really needs to do. And by the way, you know, you need to do some customer journey planning as a hint there, and then get them to do those things. Okay, so focus your CS team on the things that really matter to your clients, to be customer centric, to get them through their customer journey in a suitable way. The third thing is be joined up about it, because what I see also is frustrated CSMs who say, oh yeah, Rick, well, that's a great idea, but sales won't tell me that data, and they're in charge of the data and they won't let us have it. I'm thinking, well, do you work for the same company or what? You know, these artificial barriers where, you know, sales are hoarding that information because it gives them more power. That's no good, you know, and that's obviously not the CSM's fault. And to be honest, it may not be the sales people. That's a cultural issue from the top again, isn't it? So that can only be fixed from above. So I would say that's number 3.
Great, thanks for sharing that.
Collaboration.
Do we have any other questions, Shivam?
No, I think we don't have any more questions.
Cool. Okay, we are good. Guys, as I mentioned in my LinkedIn post as well, this is a series of events which is leading to an offline event in June, which is planned for 17th of June in Bangalore. So in case you want to catch up, please do register on the link that Shivam is going to share in a moment. In case you have any other questions, feel free to ask. You can raise your hands, and you can also connect with Rick and myself via LinkedIn, and we would be there to help you out.
Absolutely.
I think we have
Yes. Yeah, I think we have one more question from Aditya. He says that, what would you suggest we cover in customer advocacy?
Customer advocacy. Well, the idea of customer advocacy is, if I say my product's good, then that's, you know, useful to know. But if a previous customer who purchased it and used it says my product is good, then that's much more powerful. So advocacy is about a third party supporting you by saying your product is good and useful. So why would the customer success manager care about that or be involved in that? Well, because as Ankit was saying, we're in a privileged position as customer success managers of being able to develop trust relationships. And you are only going to get someone who has built that relationship with you, who's going to be prepared to act as your advocate. So marketing want great case studies. Marketing want fantastic testimonials. Marketing would love a customer to turn up at a launch event and say how they used version 1 and how excited they are to adopt version 2 now. You know, but why should a client do any of that for you? There's no value to them. It's only because you've given so much value that they're prepared to give some back. So the CSM then is in that position, perhaps, to ask that favor of the client.
Right. Thank you. There's one more question. Do you need an MBA degree to become CSM? What are your thoughts on this, Rick?
No.
Same here.
No, you don't need an MBA to become a CSM. You don't need any formal qualification really to become a CSM. There are think of it as like, you know, like a stool. You need at least 3 legs on a stool because otherwise it falls over, right? So the 3 legs of the stool in terms of your expertise that you need. Number 1 is an understanding of the industry that the customer is in.
Yeah.
If you sell like accountancy software, you better understand accountancy, because otherwise you can't speak the language of your client, and you're going to be saying things and they're going to be rolling their eyes saying, well, that's useless. It doesn't do what we need it to do, because you don't understand their world. If you sell to heavy manufacturing, understand the world of heavy manufacturing. If you sell to education, understand how colleges work. Okay. You've got to understand your customers. That's the first leg of your stool. The second leg of your stool is your product. Understand your product. Know what its capabilities are, what it does, what it doesn't do, how it does what it does, and what's needed to get it to do it. And then that's how you're useful, because they already know the first leg. What they want is for then you to combine those two. Okay, so that's the second. The third leg is what we teach at Practical CSM, which is customer success management best practice. The process of taking the customer through the post-sales customer journey from unconscious incompetence through to mastery of your product and measurement and proof of value, and wanting to renew, wanting to be your advocate, wanting to purchase more of it because they have been successful in using your product. There is a best practice way. You can just, hope it happens, or you could, learn the best way of doing it. And that's what we teach. So that's the third leg of the stool. If you want a stool to be really, really nice and firm, give it 4 legs. The fourth leg is what we talked about earlier, which is your own personality and your emotional intelligence and your general capabilities as a person. Are you a self-disciplined? Are you a good problem solver? Are you a great negotiator? Can you communicate? Can you teach? Can you lead? Can you inspire? Are you able to put up with people's stress and management and turn that around into a conversation that's practical and useful? That side of things.
Great advice, Rick. I'm going to use that example for sure, because I get this question a lot. But now I know that 3 pillars, 4 pillars, how can I give this example to people? Thanks a lot for this. And thanks a lot for joining, everyone. In case you have more questions, feel free to reach out to Rick and I on LinkedIn, and we would be there to help you out.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sure everyone liked it. I'd like to close the session, but if you have any other questions, like Ankit said, I have shared Ankit's and Rick's LinkedIn links on this chat box. You can reach out to them. Well, thank you, Ankit, and most importantly, Rick, for the discussion. I'm sure this was an insightful session for all our attendees, and also a big thanks to all of the attendees for making this webinar special. If you have any more questions, you can always reach out to Rick and me. And once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a survey on the webinar. We would appreciate if you could complete that and provide your feedback. It really helps us to bring you better webinars. Well, thanks for your time, Rick, Ankit, and everyone. Thanks.
Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.